So the Harris campaign scrambling to put out the fire sparked by the military record of Kamala's running mate, Tim Walz. They had just had to clean up some false comments about that he made, carrying a weapon, quote, in war, saying the governor simply misspoke. But the stolen valor accusations, they keep coming. Listen to his former military superior.
Tim Walz knew the processes and the procedures. He went around me and above and beyond me and went to get somebody to back him to get him out of there without, it was just a backdoor process.
So the Kamala campaign, they try to keep it quiet. They're not talking about it. Then on Friday night, and you know that's when all the stuff gets buried, they put out a statement saying he misspoke. And the media then immediately shifted to, good for them for admitting it. Okay, now we can all move on.org. And then you think about the same media that they took Brett Kavanaugh's high school yearbook and like got the Ouija board out and tried to figure it out. It took people on the internet 5 minutes to figure out that this was actually something that had happened, this embellishment.
We all misspeak. I once misspoke in Iraq during a Operation Desert. No, I will defer to people who served, whether or not this is stolen valor or not. But I have, and they're pretty loud and clear that this guy peddled a greater version of his service. And Joey Jones was on my show Friday, and he said something that was really perceptive. When he exaggerated his service, or he never corrected anyone when they would indulge his embellishments, he was denigrating his own service, basically saying that my service in the National Guard wasn't good enough. So I had to say these things because, and then you kind of know that he denigrated it because he also denigrated others in the National Guard by saying they're just 19-year-old cooks when he had the opportunity to have them come in and quell the rioting and the arson. But I think the most adolescent argument that you're going to find is, well, you didn't serve and Trump didn't go. It's like, well, yeah, I never said he did. I never said anything. I never said I did. You know, it's not about serving, morons. It's about lying about service, which is why bringing up Walz's 24 years in the National Guard as a way out of this debate is BS. Stolen valor is almost entirely performed by people who have served. That's why vets hate it so much, because it's usually somebody in that world. Yeah. It's not like Brian going around telling everybody, you know, he was a Green Beret anymore.
He just wore one.
Yes, yeah, and that's all he wore when he used to dance at Chippendales. But Walt's defenders, they pivot to that like, but he served because they know that Waltz has been caught dead to rights.
Brian.
Couple of things. Tom Barron, I'll just go to the like you said, let's go to the people that serve. Tom Barron took his place, told the New York Post he believes Waltz is a traitor and a coward who claims valor. And then when it comes to 9/11, 20 years ago, to mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11, he spoke to veterans saying he remembered being at Bagram Air Base for a ramp ceremony, and he still thinks about it to this day. He's never in Afghanistan. So I think this is issues that should be brought up because you want to know what else he's not telling the truth about. It doesn't mean you don't respect him for serving 25 years. I do. I also think you should talk about how it catapulted his career because the military enabled him to go to college in order to move forward in his life.
Harold Ford Jr., what do you think?
So I think two things. First, it was sloppy what he said, and it was wrong. And I'm glad they corrected it, and I'll be interested in hearing Governor Walz talk about this when he sits down for an interview. Two, I understand what Greg is saying, and that I think that those of us who have not served, who say I didn't serve and he served 24 years, I do think there's something to that because he still did serve 24 years. But your point is well taken. I think Democrats should understand it as well. You can't be accused of stolen valor if you didn't serve. Yeah. So that part of it is absolutely true. It's important to note that he is the highest enlisted person. Put aside the words, the highest enlisted person to ever be on a presidential ticket in the history of our country, Democrat or Republican running for president. I salute Senator Vance. I saw one of the great things I saw a reporter from another network host who had been critical of Senator Vance have on someone who was a commander, or who he reported to when he was in the Marines. And this woman said, I don't agree with his politics, but he was as good a Marine that ever worked for me, that ever reported to me. I give them great credit for that. I thank him for that. And I'm sure there are those that serve with Governor Walz who are going to say positive things, and there are obviously those who, whatever the motivations are, who will say the things that you quoted, Brian, and even what we saw in the lead-in.
Harold, how dare you? George Washington was a general. Judge, give you the last
He was
word.
not enlisted. I'm talking about being enlisted at 17.
Okay.
Look,
Eisenhower,
all
too.
of the media
Eisenhower, too.
is going nuts, and they're going to bat for Walz. The same media, if Donald Trump is on television, if you don't have someone who's going to fact check his lies, they have a fit. Okay? But with Walz, it's okay. He can lie. Let me tell you something. There's a reason why in a court of law, you can say to a jury, if you believe a witness has lied to you about a fact, a material fact, you are free to disregard that person's entire testimony.
Yeah.
So this guy lied about carrying weapons of war in war. That's not misspeaking. That's a lie. Number two, abandoned his unit, went around his own leader to get someone to give him permission to leave, okay? And the people who are upset about that are the mothers of the son of one of the people in this battalion who was 19 years old and died, all right? Then carrying the title, another lie, Command Sergeant Major, that he didn't finish the requirements for, is he glommed onto the title according to everyone who's a senior in the National Guard. That is a lie. And trying to convince the American people when he's talking to veterans, quote, I stood in the dark of night on the tarmac in Bagram. That was in 2011 with a congressional delegation, as opposed to 2021 in Afghanistan when it mattered. Donald Trump never lied. This guy is a liar.
All right.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.